If you're thinking about moving to Lethbridge, Alberta, you probably have a ton of questions. What's it like living here? Is it the right fit for you? Is it cheap? Is it safe? Is it expensive? Is it fun? Am I gonna like it here? Are the people friendly? The list goes on and on. Well, stick around because in this video, I'm gonna share 5 things that you absolutely need to know before making Lethbridge your new home. Whether you're coming from another province or just looking for a change of pace, these tips will help you feel more prepared and excited about the move. So let's get into it. So first up, let's talk about the vibe of Lethbridge. This city is actually pretty unique, and it's a mix of small town friendliness with just enough of that big city feeling to keep things interesting. For years, I have always said that Lethbridge feels like a big town and a small city. You'll find yourself surrounded by wide open prairie landscapes, stunning coulees, and of course, the iconic high-level bridge. It's definitely a slower pace of life compared to the other big cities like Calgary or Edmonton in Alberta, but if you're thinking about moving to Lethbridge, that's probably what you're looking for. However, if you are looking for that more of the hustle and bustle of those bigger cities, then definitely look at a place like Calgary or Edmonton. Now, in those bigger cities, there are a lot of pros, but just as many cons, like safety, commute times, affordability, and of course the list goes on. Lethbridge, however, is the kind of place where you can actually breathe and enjoy the scenery and the space, and maybe even get to know your neighbors. Now, because we are a little bit smaller, it doesn't mean that there's nothing to do and you're going to be bored all the time. There's festivals, there's concerts, and there's events like Whoop Up Days, which is like a smaller version of the Calgary Stampede. Here, you're going to find some chiller vibes, some local cafes, and there's honestly a lot going on if you know where to look. Now, let's get into those 5 things that you need to know. So number 1 is the weather. And it's an experience, just to say the least. So Lethbridge is famous for its Chinook winds, and let me tell you that it can get friggin' windy here. I'm talking like 100-kilometer-an-hour winds, but thankfully, not very often. These Chinook winds are warm and dry winds that usually make their way through the west during those winter months, and it turns the winter from being -20 one week to sometimes even +15 the next. And it's what really gets you through those long winter months. Now, that sounds pretty awesome, doesn't it? But of course, the downside is that it is going to be windy for a couple days before it warms up. And one day you're going to be bundling up in your big winter jacket, and the next you might be outside in a t-shirt. But the thing that kind of bothers me that I've kind of been struggling with lately is the fact that it gets cold, then it gets warm, all the snow melts, and your car is full of mud and salt and everything like that. And you don't really have time to wash it because within the next week, it's probably going to be colder, at least cold enough that you can't really wash your vehicle, and it gets all slushy out, and the snow doesn't really stick around, which is a good thing. I'm glad the snow doesn't stick around, but it is kind of a roller coaster all winter long. Now, this is a love it or hate it thing, but at least we don't get as much snow as other parts of Alberta. Take this year, for example. We had about 2 weeks back in late October where it was about -20-ish, and the Chinook wind came through and it warmed us up, and we went all the way to the New Year's with very close to plus digits and even above 0 for a lot of those days. And no snow up until, pretty much just now. Number 2 is the cost of living, and it's surprisingly affordable here. If you're coming from a big city, you're going to absolutely love this. It's going to be a total change for you. Housing in Lethbridge is much more affordable compared to places like Calgary and pretty much anywhere in BC or Ontario. The average home here in Lethbridge is right around $400,000 to maybe $420,000. And you can easily get into a modest detached starter home for between $350 to $400, especially if you need a garage. Without a garage, you can even find something a little bit cheaper. Whether you're looking to rent or buy, your dollar is going to stretch a lot further here than those other big cities. Plus, everyday expenses like groceries and gas are going to be pretty reasonable too. And we are talking about Alberta as a whole. We don't really have any provincial land tax like they do in BC. And here in Alberta, we only have a 5% GST, no HST or PHC, which is something that I think a lot of people overlook before they get here. And just to talk a little bit more about that land transfer tax, in other provinces, when you're buying a home, having no land transfer tax is going to save you a ton of money right off the bat. The one thing that I will say about Lethbridge is that our property tax here is a bit higher than most other cities, which of course I'm not happy about and nobody really is. But at the end of the day, our housing prices are very cheap and we have a lot more space and we're not very dense either. So you got to just take the pros with the cons there. Now, before we move on, if you've already made up your mind that Lethbridge is the place for you or you want to learn more, I do have over 200 videos on my channel, so you can keep binging and learning some more. But down below is a link to sign up for auto email listings. Basically how this works is you type in your desired criteria and I'll send you a list of every available property within that criteria. And every time a new listing hits the market, you're going to get emailed so you never miss one. Now, let's get back to point number 3. Point number 3 is that it is a university town here. So with the Lethbridge College, now called Lethbridge Polytechnic, and the University of Lethbridge, we certainly do have a vibrant student population. And actually about 20% of our population is made up of students. That means you're going to find plenty of activities geared towards those younger folks, but the nightlife is kind of lagging here. I mean, we don't really have too many big clubs anymore. Most of them are kind of bars that are just open late. And there's also a ton of recreational and sports leagues too, which is not just geared towards younger folks. They're kind of geared towards everybody, like pickleball, for example, or even curling. But don't worry, just because there's lots of students here, it is the furthest thing from a party town. I've actually heard of a couple people moving here and they say, well, I don't want to live on the west side of Lethbridge because I don't want to be close to the university and have kids partying all the time. Believe me, that is definitely not the case. There's some little small pockets really close to the university where you might find that, but in general, you're not going to notice any students here. And I've also found that kids just don't party like they used to anymore. They almost none of them drink, and like there's no really big parties or big bars to go to anyway. But that student vibe adds some energy without taking away from the city's overall laid back feel. However, you will notice that in the summer when the students go home, that the streets and the traffic will kind of ease up quite a bit, which is actually great. There's no better time than the summer to have, streets a little bit quieter. But speaking of traffic, let's move on to the next point. The fourth thing you need to know before moving to Lethbridge is that getting around can be a breeze. So one of my favorite things about Lethbridge is how easy it is to actually get around, especially if you're driving. Traffic is almost non-existent compared to other big cities, and you can get from one side of the town all the way to the other in less than 15 minutes. I'm talking one complete end to the other. And most of your commute times are going to be within 8 minutes on average, depending, of course, what city you live in and where you work. The public transportation system here is okay. It's pretty solid. And for those outdoor enthusiasts especially, or those fitness freaks out there, no judgment. I know you got to stay healthy. I get it. There's actually an extensive trail system for biking and walking all throughout the city and even the coulee. And just a side note too, Lethbridge has more park space per capita than anywhere else in Alberta. However, I will say Lethbridge is very easy to get around in if you do have a car. Now, when it comes to walking or public transportation, honestly, Lethbridge is a very first drive city, and you're just going to find it more enjoyable and more easy to get around if you have a vehicle. However, let's move on to the fifth thing that you need to know, and that is that nature is right at your doorstep. So if you love the outdoors, Lethbridge is an absolute paradise and is probably one of the best areas for diverse landscapes in all of Alberta. You see, my wife and I used to work with Travel Alberta, and we used to go all over the province to promote different areas of this beautiful piece of the country. And throughout this experience, we actually came to realize how awesome Southern Alberta is. And one day you could be in Writing-on-Stone seeing world-class kudos, and with just an hour drive you could be in Waterton Lakes National Park seeing some of the most incredible mountain landscapes that you've ever seen. Now, that is a national park, so if you just go a little bit north of there, you're going to be at a ski hill at Castle Mountain Ski Hill, and then you're going to be in the Crow's Nest Pass, which again is gorgeous and has some of the most beautiful hiking and some of the most beautiful landscapes you're ever going to see. Now, the coulees that are located right in Lethbridge are perfect for hiking and exploring, and the city itself has plenty of parks, including the beautiful Henderson Lake in the south and Nicholas Sharon Park in the west. So there you have it, 5 things that you need to know before moving to Lethbridge. Basically, Lethbridge is a city full of surprises. It's a mix of natural beauty, affordability, and that warm, welcoming Alberta spirit. I know that sounds a little bit cheesy, but it's honestly true. So if you're ready to embrace the winds, the friendly neighbors, and the endless prairie skies, you're absolutely going to love it here. So if you guys have any questions about making that move, all of my information is located down below. Feel free to call, text, or email me anytime. And if you guys want to learn more about Lethbridge, I have a whole playlist right here. And if you guys never want to miss another one, just subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next video.